I knew smuggling a 20-pound ginger tabby into the headquarters of the most dangerous werewolf pack on the East Coast was a suicidal idea. But when you're living out of a suitcase and your only friend is a cat named Barnaby who hates everyone, you don't have many options. I expected to be arrested at the front desk. I expected to be escorted out by security for violating the strict no biological contaminants policy. What I didn't expect was to get stuck in a glass elevator with the Alpha King himself, or for him to mistake my purring cat for a secret pregnancy. Now, I have a job I'm unqualified for, a fake fiancé I'm terrified of, and a cat who sleeps on the royal silk sheets. And the king? He thinks he owns us both. Welcome back to the Library Pack. It's Raven, and I have a story today that is going to absolutely melt your heart, and maybe make you want to adopt a cat. Before we dive into the romance, I want to do a quick roll call. Where in the world are you listening from right now? And more importantly, do you have a furry reading buddy with you today? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you want to support the channel and get early access to these stories, plus some exclusive badges to show off in the comments, hit that join button below to become an official pack member. It helps keep the library open and the stories coming. Now, get comfortable. Let's find out what happens when a homeless archivist hides a ginger cat in her coat and runs into the Alpha King. Chapter 1. The air in the elevator was so thin, I felt like I was breathing through a straw. It wasn't the altitude. It was the man standing less than 2 feet away from me. Magnus Callahan, the Alpha King, the billionaire CEO of Obsidian Corp. He was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my entire college tuition, and he was staring at the digital floor numbers with a boredom that felt dangerous. I pressed my back against the glass wall, clutching my oversized thrift store trench coat tighter around my middle. Underneath the layers of wool, strapped to my chest in a makeshift baby sling, was Barnaby, my 20-pound, one-eared, very grumpy ginger cat. I had dosed him with enough organic catnip to sedate a tiger, but the drugs were wearing off. I could feel him shifting against my stomach, his claws kneading into my sweater. Please don't meow, I prayed silently. Please, just stay asleep for 10 more floors. Magnus turned his head. He didn't move his body, just his head. His eyes were the color of molten gold, and they locked onto me with the weight of a physical blow. He took a step closer. The elevator felt instantly smaller. You smell like adrenaline, he said. His voice was a low rumble that I felt in my bones rather than heard. And milk. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my heart from hammering a hole through my ribs. I had a latte for breakfast. No, he murmured, taking another step. He was in my personal space now. He loomed over me, blocking out the light, smelling of cedar, rain, and raw power. He tilted his head, inhaling deeply near my neck. You smell like a prey animal that knows it's trapped. I'm claustrophobic, I lied, my voice squeaking. Elevators make me nervous. His gaze dropped to my midsection. My coat was bulging suspiciously, the heavy weight of Barnaby making me look several months along. Magnus frowned, his brows knitting together. He reached out, his hand hovering inches from the lump in my coat. You are terrified, he said, his voice dropping to a harsh, possessive whisper. And I hear 2 heartbeats. Who got you pregnant? My eyes went wide. What? No, I'm not. Do not lie to me, he growled, his eyes flashing. The air around us crackled with static electricity. I can hear the second heart. It's racing, fast, too fast. Before I could explain that the racing heart belonged to a geriatric feline with an anxiety disorder, Barnaby decided he had enough. The catnip haze broke. A low demonic yowl erupted from my stomach. Magnus froze. His hand was still hovering over my coat when Barnaby struck. The cat launched himself upward, claws tearing through the buttons of my trench coat. A ball of orange fur exploded into the space between us. I shrieked, trying to catch him, but Barnaby was faster. He leaped from my chest and landed squarely on the Alpha King. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the sound of snapping bones. I was about to witness the murder of the last living thing I loved. I was going to be fired, arrested, and then probably eaten. Get off him, Barnaby, I yelled, reaching out. But there was no screaming. There was no bloodshed. I opened one eye. Magnus Callahan was standing perfectly still. His hands were raised, not to strike, but to support the massive ginger cat currently clinging to his silk tie. Barnaby, the cat who had hospitalized my landlord and hissed at every boyfriend I'd ever had, was not scratching. Barnaby was purring. It sounded like a diesel engine. He rubbed his scarred cheek against Magnus's sharp jawline, drooling slightly onto the lapel of the $5,000 suit. Magnus looked down at the animal, then up at me. The golden fire in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by genuine bewilderment. "This," Magnus said flatly, "is not a baby." "No," I whispered, shrinking back against the glass. "That's Barnaby." "You smuggled a predator into my secure facility." "He's not a predator," I argued weakly. "He's diabetic." Magnus looked back at the cat. Barnaby let out a soft MRP and started kneading Magnus's chest muscles, his claws pricking the expensive fabric. Instead of throwing the cat across the room, Magnus slowly, hesitantly, ran a large hand down Barnaby's spine. The cat arched into the touch, closing his eyes in ecstasy. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open to reveal the reception area of the penthouse level. 3 security guards were waiting, hands on their holstered tasers. "Sir!" the head guard shouted, seeing the animal on the king's chest. "Breach! Step away from the—" "Stand down," Magnus ordered. His voice was steel. The guards froze. Magnus didn't look at them. He kept his eyes on me. He plucked Barnaby off his chest, holding the massive cat in one arm like a football, where Barnaby settled in comfortably. "Miss Hale," Magnus said, glancing at the ID badge clipping to my coat. "You have compromised my security, lied to an alpha, and brought a biological contaminant into my private sector." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I can explain. I'm homeless. I had nowhere else to—" "However," he interrupted, scratching Barnaby behind the ears, causing the traitorous cat to drool again. "This animal is the only living thing in this building that isn't afraid of me." He stepped out of the elevator, taking my cat with him. He turned back to look at me, his silhouette framed by the panoramic view of the city skyline. "You have 2 choices, Talia," he said, testing my name on his tongue. "You can go to prison for corporate espionage, or you and the beast can move in. I have a feeling I'm going to need you both." Chapter 2. I didn't actually say yes. I was simply too stunned to say no before the Alpha King turned his back on me and walked into his fortress, carrying my cat like a hairy orange football. I stumbled after him, my oversized sneakers squeaking on the pristine black marble floors, acutely aware that I was walking into the lion's den. Or rather, the wolf's den. The penthouse wasn't a home. It was a statement. It was a sprawling expanse of steel, glass, and shadows, perched so high above the city that the clouds looked like they were part of the furniture. There were no family photos, no knickknacks, no color, just endless shades of charcoal and ice. Magnus stopped in the middle of a living room the size of a tennis court. He set Barnaby down on a sofa that probably cost more than my kidney. "Don't!" I gasped, reaching out. "He sheds! That looks like Italian velvet." "It is," Magnus said, unbothered. He walked over to a wet bar that looked like a chemistry lab for alcoholics. "And I don't care. The cleaners come on Tuesdays." Barnaby, sensing the lack of discipline, immediately began to sharpen his claws on the armrest. Scritch, scritch, rip. I winced with every sound, waiting for Magnus to snap, to shift, to throw us off the balcony. Instead, Magnus poured 2 glasses of amber liquid and turned to watch the destruction with a look of clinical fascination. "He destroys things," Magnus observed, handing me a glass. "Why do you keep him?" "Because he's loyal," I said, taking the glass with trembling fingers. I didn't drink. I needed my wits about me. "And because nobody else wanted him, the shelter was going to put him down because he was socially hostile." Magnus's lips twitched. A ghost of a smile? No, surely not. "Socially hostile. I can relate." He took a sip of his drink, his golden eyes scanning me from my messy bun to my scuffed shoes. It wasn't a sexual look, at least not entirely. It was an appraisal. He was weighing my value. You are homeless, he stated. It wasn't a question. My spine stiffened. I am currently between leases. You are lying, he countered smoothly. Your coat smells like mildew and stale coffee. Your shoes are worn through at the heel. And you brought a cat to a job interview because you have nowhere safe to leave him. He set his glass down. I ran a background check on you the moment you stepped into the elevator. Talia Hale, Master's in Library Science. Heavy student debt. Evicted 3 days ago. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, a mix of shame and anger. If you know all that, then you know I'm qualified for the archivist position. I don't need your charity. I need a paycheck. I don't do charity, Magnus said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, low rumble. He stepped closer, the predator closing in. I do investments, and right now you are a very interesting asset. I'm an asset? I scoffed, crossing my arms over my chest. I'm a liability. I just broke into your building. Exactly. You bypassed 3 layers of security because my guards didn't perceive you as a threat. You are invisible, Talia. And you have the only creature in this city that doesn't smell like fear when I walk into a room. He gestured to Barnaby. My traitorous cat had finished destroying the sofa and was now asleep on his back, legs splayed open, snoring loudly. I need a buffer, Magnus said enigmatically. And I need an archivist who can keep a secret. You can live in the East Wing. You will organize my family library, which is a disaster. And in exchange, you get room, board, and a salary. And if I say no? Magnus leaned in, his face inches from mine. I could see the gold flecks in his irises. Then I call security back up here and they arrest you for corporate espionage. You'll go to prison. And the cat? He glanced at Barnaby. The cat goes to the pound. My heart stopped. He knew exactly where to hit me. I looked at Barnaby, snoring blissfully on the ruined velvet. I looked back at the Alpha King, who was waiting with the patience of a spider. Fine, I whispered. I'll take the job. Good. Magnus straightened up, buttoning his suit jacket. Get comfortable. The East Wing is yours. But don't get too settled. We have a visitor arriving in 10 minutes, and I need you to be holding that cat when she walks in. Who is she? Magnus checked his watch, a grimace marring his perfect face. A headache, and she's allergic. Chapter 3. The East Wing was a lie. It wasn't a wing. It was a luxury apartment inside the luxury apartment. The bathroom had a tub deep enough to scuba dive in, and the bed was covered in sheets with a thread count that felt like butter. I didn't have time to enjoy it. I had just finished dumping Barnaby's litter box into a gold-plated trash can when the elevator chime echoed through the penthouse. Talia! Magnus's voice boomed from the main atrium. Bring the beast, now! I scooped up Barnaby, who grumbled a low protest, and ran into the living room. Magnus was standing by the fireplace, looking tense. His shoulders were tight, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked less like a billionaire playboy and more like a soldier preparing for a bomb to go off. The elevator doors slid open. A woman stepped out. She was stunning. Tall, blonde, and wearing a white dress that looked like it was made of woven diamonds. She radiated perfection. She also radiated a scent that even my human nose could pick up. Expensive perfume and entitlement. Magnus, she purred, walking toward him with her arms outstretched. You didn't answer my texts. The council is getting impatient. Sophia, Magnus said, not moving to hug her. He took a subtle step back. I've been working. You're always working, she sighed, pouting. Daddy says we need to set a date. The solstice is coming up. It would be the perfect time to announce our union. She reached for his arm, her manicured fingers brushing his bicep. Magnus flinched. It was microscopic, but I saw it. He didn't want her touching him. Then Sophia stopped. Her nose twitched. She frowned, sniffing the air. What is that smell? It smells like dander. Magnus's eyes snapped to me. Talia, come here. I stepped out from behind the marble pillar, clutching Barnaby to my chest like a shield. Sophia turned, and her eyes widened in horror. What is that? This is Barnaby, I said. trying to sound professional while holding 20 pounds of dead weight. "It's a cat," Sophia screeched, backing away. She covered her nose and mouth with her hand. "Magnus, you know I'm deathly allergic. My throat closes up if I'm in the same room as a rodent." "He's a feline," I corrected helpfully. "Get it out," Sophia commanded, her voice turning shrill. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "And who is this? The maid? Why is the help holding a biological weapon?" Magnus stepped between us. The air in the room changed instantly. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He moved with a predator's grace, placing himself firmly between Sophia and me. "She is not the maid," Magnus said, his voice cold and hard as diamond. Sophia blinked, her eyes watering. Whether from the allergy or the tone, I couldn't tell. "Then who is she? Why is she here?" Magnus looked at me. For a second, I saw panic in his eyes. He was the Alpha King, the ruler of the East Coast, and he was terrified of this woman forcing him into a marriage he didn't want. He needed an out. He needed a nuclear option. He reached out and grabbed my free hand. His grip was warm, firm, and possessive. "She is here," Magnus said, looking Sophia dead in the eye. "Because she lives here." Sophia gasped, a wheezing sound. "Lives here? In the penthouse?" "Yes," Magnus lied, squeezing my hand so hard my knuckles cracked. "Sophia, meet Talia, my fiancé." My jaw dropped. Barnaby, sensing the tension, let out a loud, wet sneeze directly in Sophia's direction. Chapter 4. The silence that followed was deafening. It was broken only by Sophia's horrified gasping and Barnaby licking his paw, completely unbothered by the chaos he had caused. "Fiancé?" Sophia choked out, her face turning blotchy. "But she's... Look at her. She's wearing canvas shoes." "I find her humility refreshing," Magnus said smoothly, pulling me closer until my hip bumped against his thigh. The contact sent a jolt of electricity up my spine that had nothing to do with fear. "Now, Sophia, you should go. Your eyes are swelling shut. We wouldn't want you to go into anaphylactic shock before the solstice." Sophia glared at me with enough venom to kill a lesser mammal, then spun on her heel and fled to the elevator. As the doors closed, she shouted, "The council will hear about this, Magnus. You can't marry a nobody." The doors shut. Magnus didn't let go of my hand. He stood there, staring at the closed elevator, his chest heaving slightly. "Fiancé?" I hissed, trying to yank my hand away. He held on for a second longer than necessary before releasing me. "You told her I was your fiancé? That wasn't in the job description." "It is now," Magnus said. He turned and walked briskly toward his office, a massive room walled with glass. "Put the cat down and come here. We need to draft a contract." "I am not marrying you," I chased after him, Barnaby trotting at my heels, hoping for treats. "I just met you. You threatened to send me to prison." "It's a fake engagement, Talia. Use your brain," Magnus snapped, sitting behind a desk that looked like it was carved from a single piece of obsidian. He pulled a fountain pen from his pocket. "Sophia represents the old council. They want to control my pack by marrying me into her family. If I'm already engaged, they can't force a union. It buys me time to dismantle their influence." He started writing furiously on a legal pad. "I will pay off your student loans. All of them. Plus a monthly stipend of $10,000. You will live here. You will attend the Winter Solstice Summit with me next week. We will act the part in public. In private, you stay out of my way." I stopped. My student loans? That was 6 figures of debt. Gone. Just for pretending to like a billionaire? Barnaby jumped onto the desk. He walked right over the legal pad Magnus was writing on and sat down directly on the wet ink. Magnus sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "And premium salmon for the beast, flown in daily." I looked at Magnus. Really looked at him. Beneath the arrogance and the expensive suit, he looked exhausted, lonely. He was a king trapped in a tower, besieged by people who only wanted his power. "I have conditions," I said, my voice steady. Magnus looked up, surprised. "You're in no position to negotiate." "I am if you want me to sell this lie. Sophia isn't stupid. She knows I'm not your type. I placed my hands on the desk, leaning in. 1. You don't call me the help or treat me like an employee in public. If I'm your fiancé, I'm your equal. 2. Barnaby has free roam of the penthouse. And 3. I hesitated. If we do this, you have to protect us. Sophia looked at me like she wanted to skin me alive. I'm a human, Magnus. I break easily. Magnus stood up. He walked around the desk, stopping inches from me. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with that strange static again. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers grazed my neck and my breath hitched. His touch was scorching hot. I am a wolf, Talia, he said softly. We protect what is ours. As long as you wear my ring, no one touches you. Not Sophia, not the council, no one. He picked up the paper, now smeared with Barnaby's inky paw prints, and held out the pen. Sign it. I took the pen. I signed my name right next to the paw print. Magnus took the paper back. He looked at my signature, then at me. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the gold. One final rule, he said, his voice rough. Do not fall in love with me, Talia. I don't do romance, I don't do happily ever afters. This is a business transaction. If you catch feelings, this ends. I looked into his eyes, feeling the magnetic pull between us, terrifying and undeniable. Don't worry, Your Highness. You're not my type. Good, he whispered. But as he pulled away, I saw his hand tremble. Just once. Chapter 5. The paparazzi were like wolves. Actually, according to Magnus, half of them were wolves. Keep your head down, Magnus commanded, his hand firm on the small of my back as we exited the black SUV. Don't look at the cameras, look at me. I tried to obey, but the flashbulbs were blinding. A wall of noise hit us, shouts of, "Is it true? Who is she?" And, "Magnus, look here." It felt less like a departure and more like a riot. I clutched Barnaby's carrier against my chest, terrified someone would bump into us. Barnaby, sensing the chaos, let out a war cry from inside the mesh, sounding like a furious bagpipes player. "Move!" Magnus growled at a photographer who got too close. The man scrambled back as if he'd touched a live wire. We hurried up the stairs of the private jet. This wasn't just a plane, it was a flying palace. The interior was cream leather, dark mahogany, and gold accents. It smelled like new money and old scotch. As soon as the cabin door sealed shut, silencing the screaming crowd, Magnus released me. He instantly transformed from protective fiancé back to cold CEO. "Strap the cat in," he said, walking straight to a single seat by the window and opening his laptop. "We have an 8-hour flight to Zurich. I have work to do. Don't disturb me." I blinked. "Okay. Nice to meet you too, Grumpy." I unzipped the carrier. Barnaby spilled out like liquid orange dough. He took one look at the luxurious leather seat opposite Magnus, hopped up, and circled 3 times before settling down. A flight attendant appeared, a poised woman named Elise. "Mr. Callahan, would you like your usual?" "Black coffee," Magnus said without looking up. "And for the lady?" Elise asked, eyeing my thrifted hoodie with mild confusion. "Sparkling water," I said. "And do you have, salmon?" Magnus interrupted, still typing. "Sashimi grade, for the cat. If he gets hungry, he gets loud." Elise didn't even blink. "Of course, sir." 2 hours in, the silence was suffocating. Magnus hadn't moved. He was a statue of concentration, his brow furrowed in a way that made my fingers itch to smooth it out. Barnaby had eaten better than I had all week and was currently grooming his tail on the armrest. "You know," I said, breaking the silence, "you're going to get eye strain." Magnus paused. He looked up slowly. "I'm sorry?" "You're squinting. You need glasses." "Alphas have perfect vision," he said defensively. "Then you're frowning because you're stressed. Take a break. The company won't collapse if you look out the window for 5 minutes." He looked like he was about to fire me, but then the plane lurched. It wasn't a small bump, the entire jet dropped. My stomach hit my throat. The champagne flutes on the table rattled violently. "Turbulence," Magnus said calmly. It's normal over the Atlantic. Another drop. Harder this time. The lights flickered. I gripped the armrest so hard my knuckles turned white. I hate flying. I hate falling. Magnus. It's fine, he said, but he closed his laptop. The plane banked sharply to the left. A sudden jolt threw me forward against the seatbelt. I gasped, squeezed my eyes shut, and instinctively reached out across the aisle. Talia. His voice was right there. I felt a large, warm hand engulf mine. I opened my eyes. Magnus had leaned across the aisle. He wasn't looking at the window. He was looking at me. His grip was iron strong, grounding me while the world shook. His thumb rubbed the back of my hand in a slow, rhythmic circle. Look at me, he ordered, his voice cutting through the panic. The air currents are unstable, but the pilot is one of my pack. He has flown through hurricanes. You are safe. We're falling, I whispered. No, Magnus said, his gold eyes blazing with intensity. I have you. I won't let the sky drop you. For a moment, the turbulence didn't matter. The only thing that existed was the heat of his hand and the absolute certainty in his voice. He held my hand until the shaking stopped, and even then he didn't let go right away. Chapter 6. The Swiss Alps were showing off. It was a world of white peaks and jagged ice, beautiful and terrifying. The car dropped us off at the foot of a private drive, and my jaw hit the floor. That's a house? I asked. It looks like an Apple store crashed into a glacier. The chalet was a masterpiece of glass and steel cantilevered over the side of a mountain. It was modern, sleek, and totally isolated. It's the Obsidian Winter Lodge, Magnus said, grabbing his bags. We have total privacy here. The staff has stocked the kitchen and left. It's just us. Just us, I repeated. And the cat. I opened the car door to let Barnaby out. He took one step onto the pristine, powdery snow, froze, and lifted his paw with a look of absolute betrayal. He shook the snow off his foot and looked at me as if I had personally insulted his ancestors. He won't walk in it, I sighed. Magnus rolled his eyes. Ridiculous animal. He walked over, scooped the 20-pound cat up with one arm, and tucked him against his cashmere coat. Barnaby immediately buried his face in Magnus's scarf. It was becoming annoying how much my cat preferred the fake fiancé to me. We walked inside. The interior was breathtaking, fireplaces roaring in every room, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley, and fur throws everywhere. The staff prepared the master suite, Magnus said, heading up the floating staircase. Since we are ostensibly here to celebrate our engagement, we have to keep up appearances in case the cleaning crew comes back. I lugged my suitcase up the stairs behind him. Right, appearances. We walked into the bedroom. It was the most romantic room I had ever seen. The entire far wall was glass, offering a view of the stars. A fire crackled in a stone hearth. There were rose petals, actual rose petals, scattered on the floor. But my eyes went straight to the center of the room. There was a bed. A massive, circular, custom-made bed covered in furs. And it was the only one. I looked around. No couch, no armchair large enough to sleep on. Just the bed. Magnus, I said, my voice rising an octave. I see it, he muttered. He was still holding the cat. There is only one bed. I see that. I thought you said this place had 5 bedrooms. It does, Magnus said, looking uncomfortable. But the staff, they must have closed off the other wings to save heat. They assumed we would want the honeymoon set up. I stared at the bed. It looked incredibly soft. It also looked incredibly intimate. I can sleep on the floor, I offered, though my back was already aching from the flight. Don't be a martyr, Magnus snapped, setting Barnaby down on the mattress. The cat immediately curled up in the exact center of the bed and closed his eyes. It's a king size. California king, actually. We can fit 3 people in there without touching. We are adults. We will share. Share? I squeaked. We sleep, that is all. He took off his coat and tossed it onto a chair. Unless you snore. If you snore, you're going on the balcony. Chapter 7. We built a wall, It was a fortress of pillows, bolsters, and rolled-up duvet covers running down the equator of the mattress. "This is the demilitarized zone," I announced, patting a down pillow. "You stay on the west side. I take the east side." Magnus, who was wearing silk pajama bottoms and a t-shirt that hugged his biceps in a way that should be illegal, looked unimpressed. "Talia, I have slept in trenches. I think I can handle a pillow fort." "Good. Good night." I dove into my side of the bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. I turned off the lamp. Darkness swallowed the room, save for the dying embers in the fireplace and the moonlight reflecting off the snow outside. It was quiet. Too quiet. Then, a heavy weight landed on my legs. "Barnaby." "Traitor," I whispered. He walked up my body, purring like a chainsaw, and then, because he has zero respect for international borders, he hopped over the pillow wall. "Barnaby, no," I hissed. I heard a soft grunt from the other side. "He's licking my ear." Magnus's voice came through the dark. It sounded sleepy and rough. "Push him off." "He's warm," Magnus mumbled. "He can stay." I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic breathing of the man next to me. It was terrifying how safe I felt. I should be worried about the contract, the lie, the future. But all I could think about was that his hand had held mine on the plane. Sometime in the night, the world turned to ice. I woke up shivering. My teeth were chattering. The fire had died out completely, and the high-tech heating system of the glass house had apparently decided to take a break. The room was freezing. I curled into a ball, trying to preserve heat, but the cold seeped into my bones. Then I felt it. A source of heat, a furnace, radiating warmth from the other side of the bed. Sleep-drunk and freezing, I didn't think. Instinct took over. I scooted backward. My back hit something solid and hard. The heat was instantaneous. I sighed, relaxing into the warmth. A heavy arm draped over my waist, pulling me closer. It felt heavy, protective. I was pulled flush against a hard chest. A nose buried itself in the hair at the nape of my neck. "Warm." A deep voice rumbled against my skin. I froze. This wasn't a pillow. This was Magnus. We had breached the wall. The pillows were on the floor. Barnaby was somewhere at our feet. I knew I should move. I knew this violated Clause 4 of the no-touching agreement. But he was so warm, and he smelled like cedar and winter air. Magnus shifted, his leg tangling with mine. He inhaled deeply against my neck, his breath ghosting over my sensitive skin. His hold tightened, not aggressive, but possessive, like he was holding on to something he didn't want to lose. "Mine," he whispered into the darkness. I don't think he was awake. I don't think he knew he said it, but my heart hammered against my ribs loud enough to wake the dead. I stayed perfectly still, letting the Alpha King hold me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't want to run away. Chapter 8. The morning after the cuddle incident was a masterclass in avoidance. We both woke up, realized our limbs were tangled like a pretzel, and practically launched ourselves to opposite sides of the room. Magnus went to check the perimeter, stared out the window, and I went to check the cat, buried my face in Barnaby's fur to hide my blush. By noon, however, avoiding each other became impossible. The blizzard outside had turned the world into a white void. The wind howled against the reinforced glass, burying the chalet in snow. The Wi-Fi was down. The roads were closed. We were trapped. Magnus was vibrating with restless energy. He paced the living room like a caged tiger, checking his dead phone every 30 seconds. "Magnus, stop," I said from the rug, where I was trying to teach Barnaby to high-five. He just looked at my hand with disdain. "You're making the cat nervous." "I am not used to idleness," Magnus growled, stopping in front of the fireplace. He looked ridiculous in a cable-knit sweater that softened his hard edges, making him look less like a corporate shark and more like a catalog model for rich men in winter. "I should be working. I have a merger in Tokyo." "Tokyo can wait. Come play chess." I pointed to the crystal chess set on the low table. Magnus scoffed. I don't play games, Talia, and I certainly don't play to lose. Scared, I challenged, raising an eyebrow. His eyes narrowed. He sat down opposite me. I was a grandmaster by age 12. And I was the president of the chess club at a public high school in New Jersey, I countered, setting up the board. You have no idea the kind of psychological warfare I've seen. We played. It was brutal. Magnus played like a general, aggressive, sacrificing pawns without mercy. I played like a survivor, defensive, scrapping for every inch. Barnaby sat on the arm of the sofa, watching the pieces move with predatory focus. Check, Magnus said smugly, moving his queen. Not quite, I murmured. I moved my knight. Checkmate. Magnus froze. He stared at the board. He looked at his king, trapped. He looked at me. For a moment, I thought he was going to flip the table. Then a low sound rumbled in his chest. A laugh. It started small and erupted into a genuine deep belly laugh that transformed his entire face. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. You trapped me, he said, shaking his head. I didn't see the knight. You were too focused on the power pieces, I said, grinning. You forgot about the little guys. Barnaby, deciding the game was over, jumped onto the table and swatted the king off the board. It clattered to the floor. He agrees, Magnus said, watching the cat with amusement. He poured us both a glass of wine from the open bottle on the hearth. The tension from the morning had evaporated, replaced by something warmer, heavier. We sat in silence for a while, watching the fire. The storm raged outside, but inside, it felt like a sanctuary. Talia, Magnus said quietly. He wasn't looking at the fire anymore. He was looking at me. The laughter was gone, replaced by that intense golden focus that made my breath hitch. Yeah? Everyone lets me win, he said softly. My employees, the council, even the women I date. They're so afraid of the Alpha King that they fold before the game even starts. He swirled his wine. Why aren't you afraid of me? I looked down at my glass. Because I've seen you hold a 20-pound cat like a baby because his paws got cold. It's hard to be terrified of a guy who is currently covered in orange cat hair. Magnus looked down at his black sweater. It was indeed covered in Barnaby's shedding. He didn't brush it off. He looked back at me, his gaze dropping to my lips. You are dangerous, Talia Hale, he whispered, leaning across the board. You make me forget that I'm supposed to be a monster. Chapter 9. The blizzard broke the next afternoon, revealing a world of sparkling, blinding white. The roads were cleared, which meant our isolation was over. We have to go to the main lodge for dinner, Magnus announced, buttoning a fresh shirt. People need to see us. The rumors about the engagement need visual confirmation. Do I have to wear heels? I groaned. Yes, and the necklace. The lodge was an exclusive resort restaurant down the valley. It was the kind of place where a salad cost more than my first car. When we walked in, the room went silent. Magnus's hand was on the small of my back, his thumb rubbing circles against the silk of the gown he'd bought me. And, because Magnus Callahan does whatever he wants, Barnaby was with us. Magnus had simply carried him in. When the maitre d' had opened his mouth to object, Magnus had given him a look that could curdle milk, and the man had immediately brought a high chair. So there we were, the Alpha King, his fiancée, and a fat tabby cat sitting at a candlelit table. He's eating the centerpiece, I whispered, nudging Magnus. Barnaby was chewing on a fern. Let him, Magnus said, sipping his scotch. He has expensive taste. Well, isn't this a cozy little zoo? My stomach dropped. I knew that voice. Lady Sophia was standing at our table. She looked impeccable in red velvet, flanked by two other women who looked like Mean Girl clones. Sophia, Magnus said. He didn't stand up. A blatant insult in high society etiquette. I see you brought the stray, Sophia said, her eyes flicking to Barnaby, then to me. And the cat, too. Her friends giggled. I felt myself shrink. I was wearing a $5,000 dress, but under her gaze, I felt like I was back in my oversized coat, hiding in the elevator. I heard about your little arrangement, Sophia continued, leaning a hand on our table. It's cute, Magnus, really, picking up a charity case to piss off my father. But let's be honest, she's a librarian. She smells like old paper and poverty. She'll never survive in our world. She looked at me, a cruel smile playing on her lips. How much is he paying you, dear? Whatever it is, I'll double it if you leave tonight. You're embarrassing him. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but the words stuck in my throat. She was right. I didn't belong here. Hiss. It started low and grew into a siren. Barnaby had stopped chewing the fern. He was standing on the table, back arched, ears flat, staring directly at Sophia. Ugh, control your animal, Sophia shrieked, waving a napkin at him. Barnaby swiped, claws out. He snagged the expensive silk of her red dress and pulled. Ripe. Sophia gasped. The room went silent. You little rat! Sophia raised her hand to strike the cat. Bang! Magnus slammed his glass down on the table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. He stood up slowly, towering over Sophia. The air around him shimmered with heat. His eyes were no longer human. They were pure, glowing gold. Touch him, Magnus growled, his voice vibrating with alpha command. And you will lose the hand. Sophia froze, her hand mid-air. She took a stumbling step back, trembling. Magnus, I was just... You insulted my guest, Magnus said, his voice terrifyingly calm. You insulted my home, and you insulted my fiancé. He stepped closer, forcing Sophia to retreat until she bumped into a waiter. She is not a charity case, Magnus said, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent restaurant. She is the only person in this room worthy of sitting at my table. You, Sophia, are dismissed. He pointed to the door. Apologize to my future queen, and then get out of my sight. Chapter 10. The drive away from the restaurant was silent, but it wasn't the awkward silence of the jet. It was the heavy, adrenaline-soaked silence of a narrowly avoided fight. Instead of driving back to the chalet, Magnus turned the SUV down a side path into the woods. Where are we going? I asked. Barnaby was asleep in my lap, exhausted from his battle with the red dress. I need air, Magnus said tightly, and I need to get that woman's perfume out of my nose. We stopped at a small clearing where a horse-drawn sleigh was waiting. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, lined with thick furs. The driver nodded to Magnus and walked away, leaving the horses tethered. Leave the cat in the car, Magnus said. The heater is on. He'll be safer there. I tucked Barnaby into his travel bed in the back seat and followed Magnus to the sleigh. He helped me up, his grip firm. We sat close under the firs, the night air biting at our cheeks. Magnus clicked his tongue, and the horses began to move, pulling us through the silent, moonlit forest. You didn't have to do that, I said quietly, breaking the silence. Defend me like that. It's just a contract, Magnus. You don't have to make enemies for me. It's not about the contract, Magnus said. He refused to look at me, staring straight ahead at the snow-covered pines. She looked at you like you were nothing. I wanted to tear her throat out. That's a bit extreme. I am an alpha, he said, finally turning to me. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face. We don't do things halfway. When I claim something, I protect it. Claim? I laughed nervously. Magnus, we're fake, remember? You're paying me. Are we? He stopped the horses. The sleigh glided to a halt in the middle of a frozen clearing. The silence was absolute. No wind, no cars, just the breathing of the horses and the pounding of my heart. Magnus shifted, turning his body toward me. He reached out and grabbed the lapels of my coat, pulling me inch by inch until our faces were close enough to share breath. He inhaled deeply, his eyes fluttering shut for a second. You don't smell like fear anymore, Talia. You smell like... winter. And me. That's just your coat, I whispered, my voice trembling. Is it? He opened his eyes. The gold fire was back, but it was molten now, slow and consuming. He brought one hand up to cup my cheek, his thumb tracing my lower lip. His skin was hot against the cold night air. I watched you tonight, he murmured. Sitting there with your chin held high, holding my hand, calming my beast of a cat. You fit, Talia. You fit in my life in a way that terrifies me. Magnus, the rules, I breathed. Rule number 1. I know the rules, he growled. His gaze dropped to my mouth. I wrote them. He leaned in, his forehead rested against mine. The contract, he whispered, his lips brushing against mine as he spoke. I'm thinking of burning it. And then what? I asked, my hands gripping the front of his coat. And then, he said, I renegotiate for real terms. He tilted his head, closing the final millimeter of distance. But before his lips could claim mine, a sound tore through the quiet night. A car horn, honking, rhythmically, aggressively. Honk, honk, honk. Magnus froze. He pulled back, swearing under his breath. The car. Barnaby, I gasped. He must have woken up. Magnus rested his head back against the seat and let out a long, frustrated groan. I am going to kill that cat, or promote him. I haven't decided yet. Chapter 11. The morning after the sleigh ride, the air in the chalet was thick enough to chew. We were dancing around each other, avoiding eye contact, terrified of the almost kiss that had nearly violated the contract. Magnus had retreated into his glass-walled office to handle a crisis council meeting, leaving me and Barnaby in the living room. He almost kissed me, Barnaby, I whispered, dangling a feather toy in front of the cat's nose. And I almost let him. I'm a terrible employee. Barnaby ignored the feather and stared at the front door. His ears swiveled. He let out a low, guttural growl. What is it? I asked. I stood up and walked toward the foyer. A draft chilled my ankles. My stomach dropped. The heavy oak front door was standing slightly ajar. Magnus? I called out. No answer. I could see him through the glass walls of his office, wearing a headset, shouting silently at someone on a screen. He hadn't opened the door. I stepped closer to the entryway. The scent hit me instantly. Overpowering floral perfume. Sophia. Barnaby? I turned around. The living room was empty. Barnaby! I saw the paw prints in the fresh snow on the porch. They led away from the house toward the dense pine forest, and they were being rapidly covered by fresh powder. The sky had turned a bruised purple. A flash storm was rolling in. Oh no, 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 no. I didn't think. I didn't grab a coat. I didn't knock on Magnus's office door to disturb his $1 million meeting. I just saw the darkening sky and thought of my indoor, diabetic, pampered cat freezing to death in the Alps. I ran out the door. Barnaby! Here, kitty! Kitty! The cold hit me like a physical slap. The wind howled, whipping my hair across my face. I followed the faint tracks toward the tree line. The snow was deep, soaking through my sneakers instantly. Barnaby! I heard a faint yowl from the woods. I pushed deeper into the trees. The world was turning white. The snow wasn't falling anymore. It was driving sideways. I lost the horizon. I lost the path back to the chalet. Barnaby! I screamed, my voice tearing in the wind. I saw a flash of orange huddled under the root system of a massive pine tree. Got you, I sobbed, diving into the snow. I scooped him up. He was shivering violently, his fur matted with ice. I shoved him inside my sweater, skin to fur, trying to share my body heat. I've got you. We're going back. I turned around. There was nothing but white. The footprints I had made were gone. The chalet was gone. The world was just wind and ice. I took a step forward and my foot found nothing. The ground beneath me gave way. I tumbled down a ravine, sliding over ice and rock, clutching the cat to my chest. I hit the bottom with a sickening crack of my ankle. Pain exploded up my leg. I tried to stand, but my leg collapsed. I curled into a ball in the snow, the cold already making my fingers numb. Magnus, I whispered, though I knew he couldn't hear me. Magnus. The darkness took over. Chapter 12. Dying, it turned out, was very peaceful. It just felt like falling asleep in a freezer. Barnaby had stopped shivering against my chest. I hoped he was just sleeping. I couldn't feel my toes anymore. I couldn't feel the pain in my ankle. I closed my eyes, letting the snow bury us. Then, the ground shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a rhythmic thudding, heavy, fast, approaching. A sound tore through the wind, a howl. It was so loud, so primal that it vibrated in my chest, restarting my heart. I forced my eyes open. Standing at the top of the ravine, silhouetted against the storm, was a monster, a wolf, but not a normal wolf. This creature was the size of a horse, with fur as black as a void, and eyes that burned like molten gold. "Magnus?" I cracked out, my voice a whisper. The wolf launched himself off the ledge. He landed silently in the snow beside me. Up close, he was terrifying. His teeth were the length of daggers. But he didn't snap at me. He whined, a high, frantic sound that didn't match his size, and nudged my face with his wet nose. He crouched low, pressing his belly into the snow. He looked at me, then at his back, then back at me. "Get on." "I can't," I chattered. "My leg." The wolf growled softly. He moved closer, sliding his massive head under my arm, forcing me to sit up. With the last of my adrenaline, I grabbed handfuls of his thick fur and dragged myself onto his back. He stood up, taking my weight as if I were a feather. I buried my face in his neck, the heat radiating from his body, saving my life. He took off, tearing up the side of the ravine, running through the blizzard with supernatural speed. The next thing I knew, warmth hit me. Real warmth. The smell of wood smoke. I was on the rug in front of the fireplace. The wolf was gone. Magnus was there. He was human, naked from the waist up, his skin radiating heat like a furnace. He was ripping my frozen sneakers off, his hands shaking uncontrollably. "You stupid, stubborn woman," he was shouting, though his voice sounded wrecked. "Why didn't you come to me? Why did you run?" "Barnaby," I slurred, pointing to the lump of orange fur currently thawing out on the sofa. "Sophia, let him out." Magnus froze. His hands stopped rubbing warmth into my frozen feet. He looked at the cat, then at me. A look of pure, unadulterated rage crossed his face. Not at me, but at the world. "She opened the door?" he whispered. The gold in his eyes flared. "I think so." Magnus swore, a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. He grabbed a duvet from the bed and wrapped it around me, then pulled me into his lap, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. He buried his face in my wet hair, rocking me back and forth. "I couldn't find your scent," he choked out into my neck. "The wind, it took it. I thought I lost you. I thought I was too late." "You found me," I whispered, resting my head on his bare shoulder. He pulled back to look at me. His face was pale, his eyes wild with lingering panic. "If you had died, Talia, if the cold had taken you..." His voice broke. He gripped my chin, forcing me to look at him. "I would have burned this entire mountain down until I found you." "That sounds expensive," I tried to joke. He didn't laugh. He leaned his forehead against mine, his breathing ragged. "Don't you get it? You are not just an employee. You are not just a fake fiancé. You are mine. And I nearly failed you." Chapter 13. The flight back to the city was somber. The playful banter of the chess game was gone. The charged intimacy of the sleigh ride was gone. In its place was a heavy, suffocating reality. We were going back to the real world. The bubble had burst. Magnus sat across from me on the jet, typing furiously on his laptop. He was in full war mode. He hadn't told me what he was planning for Sophia, but the set of his jaws suggested it involved lawyers or perhaps a firing squad. Barnaby sat in my lap, unusually quiet. He knew. Animals always know when the vibe shifts. "How is your ankle?" Magnus asked without looking up. "It's fine. The healer you called wrapped it well." "Good. Type, type, type. We land in 20 minutes. The car will take you to the penthouse. I have to go to the council headquarters immediately." "Oh." I felt a pang of disappointment. "Okay, I'll start packing." Magnus stopped typing. He looked up. "Packing?" "For the archives," I lied quickly. "I have a lot of books to organize." I couldn't tell him that I was mentally packing to leave. The contract said I was a fake fiancé, but what happened in the cabin, the wolf, the rescue, the way he held me, that wasn't fake. And I couldn't stay in his house pretending not to be in love with him, while he treated this like a business merger. When we landed, he barely said goodbye. He kissed my cheek, a stiff, performative peck for the paparazzi waiting on the tarmac, and got into a separate car. I went back to the empty penthouse. It felt huge and cold. Barnaby immediately ran to his litter box, happy to be on solid ground. I walked into the guest room, my room, and sat on the bed. My old canvas suitcase was in the corner. "Well, Barnaby," I said to the empty room. "It was fun while it lasted. We got some good salmon out of it." I checked the time. 6 p.m. The solstice ball was tonight. I assumed I wasn't going. Magnus hadn't mentioned it all day. He was probably negotiating my exit package right now. Ding-dong. The doorbell echoed through the apartment. I frowned. The doorman usually called. I limped to the foyer and opened the massive double doors. No one was there. Just a large, glossy black box sitting on the mat, and sitting on top of the box was a velvet jewelry case. I carried it inside and opened the card attached to the ribbon. The handwriting was sharp, jagged. Magnus's. "Talia, Sophia tried to break us by making you feel small. She thinks you are a stray I picked up. Tonight we prove her wrong. Wear this, wear the diamonds, and wait for me. Tonight we stop pretending. M." I opened the box. I gasped. Inside was a gown of midnight blue silk, dark as the night sky. And in the velvet case was a necklace that made my eyes water. Sapphires and diamonds. The Callahan family crest. "He wants us to stop pretending?" I whispered, clutching the note. Barnaby jumped up onto the table and rubbed his face against the silk dress. "I think," I said, a smile slowly spreading across my face, "we're going to a ball." Chapter 14. The Obsidian Grand Ballroom was a fortress of crystal and light. It was the kind of place where the air smelled like champagne and judgment. I stood at the top of the marble staircase, my hand gripping the velvet railing so hard my knuckles turned white. The dress Magnus had sent was a weapon. Midnight blue silk that hugged every curve before pooling at my feet, slit high up the thigh. Around my neck, the Callahan sapphires felt heavy, cold, and terrifyingly real. "Announcing," the herald boomed, his voice echoing over the hush of the crowd. "Miss Talia Hale, fiancée to the king." I took a breath. Just do the job. Walk down the stairs. Don't trip. I stepped into the light. Every head turned. 300 of the most powerful shifters and socialites in the country stopped talking. I felt exposed, a fraud wrapped in expensive silk. Then, I saw him. Magnus was standing at the bottom of the stairs. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, midnight blue to match my dress. He was talking to a pack elder, but the moment I appeared, he went still. He looked up. The expression on his face made my knees weak. It wasn't the polite smile of a fake fiancé. It was hunger. Pure, unmasked reverence. He looked at me like I was the only source of gravity in the room. He walked toward the stairs, ignoring the people trying to talk to him. He met me halfway up, taking my hand and bringing it to his lips. "You look," he whispered, his voice rough, like a queen. "I feel like an imposter," I whispered back. "Everyone is staring." "Let them stare," Magnus growled softly, tucking my hand into the crook of his arm. "Let them see what belongs to me." We descended the rest of the stairs together. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. We moved to the center of the dance floor. The orchestra began to play a waltz, slow, haunting, and romantic. Magnus pulled me close, one hand on my waist, the other holding mine. We moved together seamlessly, as if we had been doing this for years. "Talia," he said, his forehead resting against mine. "The note. Did you read it?" I did. "I meant it," he said, his eyes searching mine. "I'm tired of the contract. I'm tired of pretending that I don't want to burn the world down every time another man looks at you. I want to renegotiate." My heart hammered against his chest. Renegotiate? To what? To forever. He breathed. He leaned in. The crowd blurred. The music faded. There was just Magnus and the promise of something real. Suddenly, the music cut out with a screech of feedback. The lights in the ballroom dimmed, plunging us into semi-darkness. A spotlight hit the massive projection screens above the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen!" a voice rang out. "Sophia." I froze. Magnus stiffened, his grip on my waist turning to iron. Sophia was standing on the stage holding a microphone, looking manic and triumphant. "Before the king makes a mistake he can't undo," Sophia announced, pointing a manicured finger at me. "I think you should all know who he is really dancing with." The screen behind her flickered to life. Chapter 15. A giant image appeared on the screen. It wasn't a flattering paparazzi shot. It was my eviction notice. Red stamps. Final notice. Then it cycled to the next image. My application to the city homeless shelter, dated 3 weeks ago. Then a security camera still of me in the elevator, looking disheveled, shoving Barnaby into my coat. The crowd gasped. The sound sucked the air out of the room. "She isn't a socialite!" Sophia screamed, her voice echoing with glee. "She's a homeless con artist! She broke into the tower to steal, and Magnus hired her out of pity. She's nothing but a gold digger with a stray cat." I felt the blood drain from my body. I was naked. Every secret, every shame I had tried to hide was projected on a 40-foot screen for the elite to laugh at. "Talia," Magnus said, his voice low and urgent. He didn't let go of me. "Look at me. Do not look at them." But I couldn't help it. I looked around. The awe in the crowd's eyes had turned to disgust. They were whispering, laughing behind their hands. Homeless? Disgusting. I knew she didn't belong. "She's a fraud," Sophia chanted. "Magnus, look at her. She's playing you for your money." I pulled away from Magnus. The shame was a physical weight, crushing my chest. I wasn't a queen. I was just Talia Hale, the girl with the debt and the cat playing dress-up. "Talia, stop," Magnus commanded, reaching for me. "Stay right here." "I can't," I choked out. Tears blurred my vision. "I can't do this." "If you run, they win," Magnus growled, his eyes flashing gold. "Stand by my side. Let me handle this." "No," I whispered, backing away. "You don't need a scandal, Magnus. You need a queen. And Sophia is right. That's not me." I turned and ran. "Talia!" Magnus roared. I didn't stop. I hiked up my $1,000 gown and sprinted through the crowd. I burst through the double doors, past the startled security, and out into the cool night air. I didn't wait for the valet. I kicked off my heels and ran barefoot down the pavement, hailing the first taxi I saw. Inside the ballroom, the silence was absolute. Magnus stood alone on the dance floor. His hand was still reached out, grasping empty air where I had been. He slowly lowered his hand. He turned to the stage. Sophia was smiling, victorious. "See, Magnus? The trash took itself out." Magnus didn't speak. He walked toward the stage. He didn't walk like a man. He walked like a predator stalking a kill. He ripped his bow tie off and threw it on the floor. He climbed the stairs, looming over Sophia until she shrank back, her smile faltering. He snatched the microphone from her hand. "Get out," Magnus said. His voice wasn't a shout. It was a low, vibrating growl that shook the crystal chandeliers. "Magnus, I did this for you." "You humiliated my mate," Magnus roared, the alpha tone bringing every wolf in the room to their knees. "Get out of my city. If I see you again, I will not be a king. I will be a wolf." He dropped the mic. It hit the stage with a thud. "Where is she?" he barked at his head of security. "She took a taxi, sir, heading north." "Get the car," Magnus ordered, vaulting off the stage. "And pray we find her before she disappears again." Chapter 16. I had exactly 20 minutes before Magnus would tear the city apart, and I intended to be gone before he could find me. I burst into the penthouse, startling Barnaby, who was sleeping on the dining table. "We're leaving, buddy," I said, my voice shaking. I didn't bother changing out of the gown. I grabbed my old duffel bag and started shoving things in. My old jeans, my t-shirts, the bag of cat food. I left the diamonds on the bed. I left the contract on the desk. "Come on," I said, scooping Barnaby up. He protested with a grumble, but I shoved him into his carrier. "I'm sorry, no more salmon. Back to kibble." I ran to the service elevator. I couldn't face the doorman. I slipped out the back exit into the alleyway. It had started to rain. Of course, because the universe hates me. I walked for blocks, my bare feet splashing in puddles, the hem of the midnight blue gown dragging in the mud. I looked insane, a runaway princess with a cat carrier. I finally collapsed on a bench in a small, empty park near the river. I was shivering. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving only a hollow, aching hole in my chest where my heart used to be. "We ruined it, Barnaby," I whispered to the carrier. I let myself believe the fairy tale. Barnaby meowed softly. He stuck his paw through the mesh and patted my knee. Headlights swept across the park. I stiffened. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the curb. It wasn't a taxi. It was an armored beast with tinted windows. I stood up to run, but my legs were frozen. The door flew open. Magnus didn't wait for the driver. He jumped out of the moving vehicle. He was soaking wet, his dress shirt clinging to his chest, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked wild, deranged, beautiful. He saw me. "Talia!" He sprinted across the grass. He didn't stop until he was inches from me. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip bruising, verifying I was real. "You ran," he panted, rain dripping from his nose. "You ran from me." "I saved you the embarrassment," I cried, pushing at his chest. "Go back to your castle, Magnus. The show is over. The contract is done." "To hell with the contract," Magnus shouted, shaking me slightly. "Do you think I care about the photos? Do you think I care about the money? You should. I'm a liability. You are my life." The words hung in the rain between us. Magnus froze, realizing what he'd said. He looked at me, his golden eyes wide and vulnerable. "I didn't hear 2 heartbeats in that elevator because of the baby," he whispered, stepping closer, ignoring the rain soaking us both. "I heard 2 heartbeats because mine started beating for you the moment I saw you." He dropped to his knees in the mud, ruining his suit trousers, lowering himself to my eye level where I sat on the bench. He took my cold, muddy hands in his. "Please," he rasped, pressing his forehead against my knuckles. "Don't leave me alone in that tower. I have the money, I have the power, but until you brought that damn cat into my office, I had nothing." Barnaby let out a loud, demanding meow from the carrier. Magnus looked at the carrier, then up at me, a crooked, wet smile breaking through his anguish. "The cat votes you stay," Magnus said. "And as king, I ratify the vote." I looked at him, kneeling in the mud, begging for the girl with nothing. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." Magnus let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He stood up, pulled me into his arms, and kissed me. It wasn't a fake kiss. It was wet, cold, desperate, and perfect. "Let's go home," he murmured against my lips. Barnaby is getting wet. Chapter 17. The ride back to Obsidian Tower was silent, but it wasn't the empty, hollow silence of before. It was the heavy, charged silence of a storm that had finally broken. I was shivering, my teeth chattering uncontrollably. Magnus refused to sit on the opposite bench of the limousine. He sat right next to me, pulling me into his lap, ignoring the fact that I was covering his handmade Italian suit in river mud. He wrapped a thick cashmere blanket around both of us, creating a cocoon against the world. "Turn up the heat," Magnus barked at the driver, his arm tightening around my waist. "And drive faster." Barnaby was in his carrier on the floor, meowing the specific, mournful song of a cat who has been mildly inconvenienced. "He hates the car," I whispered, my head resting on Magnus's wet shoulder. "I'll buy him a helicopter," Magnus murmured into my hair. "He can fly next time." When the elevator opened directly into the penthouse, I gasped. I had left the apartment in a hurry, but it had been tidy. Now it looked like a hurricane had hit it. The marble coffee table was overturned, shattered into 3 pieces. Books from the shelves were scattered across the floor. A chair had been thrown through the glass partition of the dining room. "What happened?" I asked, stepping over a pile of legal documents that had been shredded. Magnus didn't look at the wreckage. He looked at me. I came home and you were gone. I didn't take it well. He gently set me down on the sofa, avoiding the broken glass, and immediately knelt to release Barnaby. The cat shot out of the carrier, shook his wet fur violently, sending a spray of muddy water all over the pristine white walls, and immediately jumped onto the mantelpiece to knock over a vase. Magnus didn't even flinch. 2 weeks ago, he would have evicted us. Now he just watched the cat with a weary fondness. Go take a shower, Magnus said, turning back to me. I'll order food, real food, no more diets, no more galas. Magnus, I ruined your night, I said, looking down at my muddy feet staining his rug. The council. Sophia. Your reputation. Talia. He walked over, cupping my face in his hands. His thumbs wiped a smudge of dirt from my cheek. If you think I care about a room full of sycophants when I have you, then I haven't done a very good job of courting you. He kissed my forehead. Go. Warm up. I showered, scrubbing the mud and the shame off my skin. When I came out, wrapped in one of Magnus's oversized robes, the living room had been miraculously cleared of debris. The fire was roaring. Magnus was standing by the balcony doors, looking out at the rain-lashed city. He had changed into gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt. He looked softer, younger. Barnaby was asleep on the rug in front of the fire, his head resting on a plate of what looked like premium Wagyu beef. You fed the cat Wagyu? I asked, walking closer. I was bribing him for his blessing, Magnus said, turning around. He accepted. He walked toward me, stopping just out of reach. The air between us crackled. The fake barrier was gone, and without it, the intensity of his gaze was overwhelming. I burned the contract, he said quietly. I figured. And I fired the legal team who drafted it. He took a step closer. There are no more terms, Talia, no more expiration date, no more stipend. So, I'm unemployed again? I tried to joke, but my voice trembled. No. Magnus reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small black velvet box. It wasn't the prop ring from the vault. It was new. I don't want an employee, and I don't want a fake fiancé. My breath hitched. Magnus. He dropped to one knee. The Alpha King, the man who made mayors tremble and wolves submit, knelt on his own rug in front of a girl wearing a bathrobe. I have spent my life building a fortress to keep people out, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I thought power was safety. I thought solitude was strength. But then you walked into my elevator with a cat strapped to your chest and you tore my fortress down in 5 minutes. He opened the box. Inside sat a diamond that looked like a piece of frozen fire. It was raw, uncut, and surrounded by small obsidians. It was wild and beautiful. You and that beast represent everything I tried to avoid. Magnus continued, his eyes locked on mine. Chaos, mess, emotion, love. Barnaby let out a loud snore from the rug. Magnus smiled, a genuine, crooked smile. I can't go back to the quiet, Talia. The silence is too loud without you. I don't want to pretend anymore. I want the fights for the blanket. I want the cat hair on my suits. I want you. He took my hand. His fingers were warm and shaking slightly. Talia Hale, will you do me the extraordinary honor of letting me annoy you for the rest of my life? Will you marry me? For real this time? Tears spilled over my cheeks. I looked at the ring, then at the sleeping cat, then at the man who looked at me like I was the sun. Yes, I whispered. Yes, you idiot. He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Magnus stood up and pulled me into a kiss that lifted me off my toes. It was a promise. A seal. But the moment was cut short by a loud crash. We broke apart. Barnaby had woken up, jumped onto the sideboard, and successfully pushed over a 17th century bust of Magnus's great-grandfather. It shattered into dust. Barnaby sat amidst the rubble, looked at Magnus, and meowed expectantly. Magnus looked at the destroyed antique. He looked at the cat. Then he looked at me, his eyes narrowing. Wait, Magnus said, his voice turning serious. "I need to ask one more question before we seal this." My heart stopped. "What?" Magnus pointed at the cat. "Does he come on the honeymoon?" "Magnus!" "Because if he comes," Magnus said, deadpan, "I'm going to need a bigger jet." "Magnus!" He laughed, sweeping me up into his arms and spinning me around, the sound echoing through the penthouse, proof that the fortress had indeed fallen. "We'll take the bigger jet," he whispered against my lips. "Just say you'll never leave." "Never," I promised. But as he carried me toward the bedroom, the elevator dinged. We froze. Who would be coming up at 2 a.m.? The doors slid open. Standing there wasn't Sophia. It wasn't the police. It was an old woman with steel-gray hair, leaning on a cane made of polished bone. She radiated power that made Magnus's alpha aura look like a candle flame next to a forest fire. Magnus went rigid in my arms. He set me down, shielding me instantly. "Grandmother," Magnus breathed, fear actually tinting his voice. The old woman stepped out. She looked at the broken table. She looked at the shattered bust. She looked at the muddy cat prints. Finally, her terrifying gaze landed on me. She didn't smile. "So," she croaked, thumping her cane on the floor, "this is the human who finally made my grandson grow a heart." She took a step closer, squinting at me. "She looks soft. I hope she bites." Barnaby, sensing a new challenger, hopped off the sideboard and walked straight up to the matriarch of the Callahan pack. He sniffed her cane. Then, he hissed. The old woman looked down at the cat. A slow, terrifying grin spread across her face. "Good," she said. "I like her already." Chapter 18. If you had told me 6 months ago that I would be spending my Tuesday night removing cat hair from a tuxedo worth more than my parents' house, I would have laughed. If you told me I'd be doing it while sitting on the desk of the Alpha King of the East Coast, wearing his ring and drinking vintage Pinot Noir, I would have checked myself into a mental institution. But here we are. The sign in the lobby of Obsidian Tower used to read, "Strictly no pets." Last week, Magnus had it replaced with a solid bronze plaque that reads, "Royal Residence, Feline Clearance Level Omega." I smoothed the lapel of Magnus's jacket and looked around the office. It had changed since I first walked in here as a trembling job applicant. The cold, sterile glass and steel aesthetic was still there, but it had been softened. There were books everywhere, stacks of rare first editions from the archives I now managed. There were throw blankets on the designer sofas. And of course, there was the cat tree. It stood 6 feet tall in the corner, made of custom-milled mahogany and plush gray velvet that matched the office furniture perfectly. Perched on the top level, looking down at the city lights of New York like a gargoyle, was Barnaby. He was wearing a bow tie, a silk one. Magnus insisted he wear it for board meetings. The door to the private elevator slid open. Magnus walked in. He looked exhausted. He had been in negotiations with the Southern Pax all day, dealing with the fallout of our very public, very dramatic wedding. He loosened his tie as he walked, his shoulders tight. But the moment he saw me, the exhaustion vanished. "You're still here," he said softly, a smile touching his lips. It was the smile he saved just for me, the one that didn't make the newspapers. "I live here, Magnus," I teased, swiveling in his massive leather chair. "It's hard to get rid of me. I signed a contract, remember?" "I burned that contract," he reminded me, crossing the room in 3 long strides. He stopped in front of the chair, placing his hands on the armrests, trapping me. He leaned down, smelling of rain and power. "Now I'm stuck with you on a tenure track. Is the wolf complaining?" "The wolf is very satisfied," he murmured, leaning in to kiss me. It was a slow, lingering kiss, the kind that made my toes curl. 6 months, and the spark hadn't faded. If anything, it had turned into a steady, roaring fire. Meow. We broke apart. Magnus rested his forehead against mine and sighed. "Every time," he grumbled. Barnaby had descended from his tower. He trotted across the polished floor, hopped onto the desk, and sat directly on Magnus's open laptop, typing a string of gibberish into a billion-dollar merger document. "He's helping," I said. He's deleting the spreadsheets, Magnus corrected, but he didn't shoo the cat away. Instead, he reached out and scratched Barnaby behind the ears. Barnaby purred, leaning into the hand of the man he once tried to maul in an elevator. Magnus straightened up, looking at his little family, the king, the queen, and the jester. I have a surprise for you, Magnus said, walking over to the safe behind his desk. Jewelry? Magnus, I have no neck left. You've covered every inch of me in diamonds. Not jewelry. He pulled out a thick envelope. He handed it to me. For the archives. I opened it. Inside was a deed to the old, crumbling library in the city center, the one that had been shut down for funding cuts years ago, the place where I used to go when I was a kid to escape. You bought the public library? I gasped. I bought the building, Magnus said, leaning against the desk. I want you to restore it. Make it the new Royal Archive, open to the public, no entry fees. He paused, smirking. And a strict pets welcome policy. I looked at him, tears stinging my eyes. He wasn't just giving me a gift. He was giving me a legacy. He was healing the part of me that had been poor and powerless. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Say you're happy, he said simply. I'm beyond happy. I stood up and wrapped my arms around his neck. I love you, Magnus Callahan. I know, he said, holding me tight. I'm lovable. He picked me up, effortlessly, as always, and walked toward the sofa. He sat down, pulling me into his lap. Barnaby, refusing to be left out, jumped up and settled on Magnus's legs, pinning us both down. The city rain lashed against the glass, but inside, it was warm. The fire crackled. The cat purred. The wolf held me. You know, Magnus said quietly, his hand resting absently on my stomach. I was thinking about the day we met. The elevator? I told you I heard 2 heartbeats. I laughed. And I told you it was the cat. It was, Magnus agreed. He went silent for a moment. His hand didn't move from my stomach. His thumb traced a gentle pattern through the silk of my dress. He went very still. Magnus? I asked, looking at his face. What's wrong? His eyes were wide. The gold in them was swirling, bright and intense. He tilted his head, listening, not to the rain, not to the cat. He was listening to me. Talia, he whispered, his voice sounding strangled. What? He looked at Barnaby, who was asleep on his knees. Then he looked at my stomach. Then he looked at my eyes, an expression of absolute, terrifying wonder dawning on his face. The cat is asleep, Magnus said slowly. His heart rate is slow. So? So. Magnus swallowed hard. Why do I still hear 3 heartbeats? I froze. My hand flew to my stomach. Magnus covered my hand with his. His eyes were blazing with a mixture of panic and overwhelming joy. Talia, he choked out. I think we're going to need a bigger castle. Barnaby woke up, looked at us both, and let out a single loud meow. Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Magnus was possessive, just wait. In this next story, the girl accidentally boards the wrong private jet and mistakes the billionaire owner for a flight attendant. But instead of correcting her, he locks the door, looks at the pilot, and says, "Take off." Click the video on your screen right now. You do not want to miss this flight.